Are you looking to launch a business, but you don't know where to start? Are you concerned about some of the risks you might face in getting your business off the ground? A business plan is a great way to plan for launching your business, as well as accounting for and planning for some of those risks you might face. I'm Mike Figliolo. I'm the Managing Director at Thought Leaders, and I consult firms all around the world on how to do exactly this. I've also used this same exact process when I launched my business 10 years ago. In this course, I'll cover how do you define your business, and then understanding the market where you're going to compete. How do you define your product or your service and then sell it to customers in a way that they'll care about? How do you run the operations such that you can support that business, as well as managing a lot of the administrative functions of your organization? Then the heart of the entire process, projecting your financial results. Look, creating a business plan doesn't have to be an intimidating process. It's really straightforward with some clear-cut components that I'll walk you through step by step. So let's dive in. As we get started, I encourage you to check out the exercise files for this course. I've included a business plan template that you can fill out. I've also included an example business plan that I wrote for my business so you can see what a completed plan looks like. So pull these up and follow along as we go through the course. You may ask, why do I need a business plan? Why can't I just launch my business and get to market? The importance of a business plan cannot be understated. First, you have to define your business and how you're going to compete. You need to understand the market and where is your business going to occupy its space in that market versus your competitors. You'll need to clearly define your product and why your customers should be interested in it. Once you've defined that product, have a good understanding of how you're going to take it to market. After you've decided how you're going to take a product to market, you need to understand and articulate how you're going to operate that business and create an operating plan to support those operations. Now that means you're going to have people, and you'll need a plan for managing your people and the resources that come along with them. You'll also need to define the administrative responsibilities and how you're going to fulfill them. Once you've got all that down, you'll need to project your financial results and create a clear financial plan that helps you understand how should the business perform over time. Now, with all of that done, you'll need to think through what are some of the major pitfalls that you could face as you launch your business and make sure you incorporate those into your plan. Now, depending on the type of business you're running, not all of these elements will be relevant. However, these are the major components of a business plan and why you need to put them in place. The first step in writing your business plan is articulating the problem that you solve. Is this a problem that people are willing to pay you to fix? You'll need to define who has the problem. Is it companies? Is it individuals? Spell out what your typical customer looks like. Then think through, how big is this problem? How does it show up for your customers? Is it a question of things are expensive and they have a cost problem? Do they have a time problem? Is it a quality issue with the products that they're turning out and you can help them improve that quality? When you write this problem statement, you should be able to take it to your target customers and they should read it and say, I have that problem. Please come fix it. That's where the demand for your product or service is going to come from. Allow me to offer a couple of examples, one bad problem articulation and one good one. I'm familiar with an individual who created an app for the iPhone. And the problem he said he was solving was, I'm going to make sure that you make it to your next appointment on time. Because the problem is you don't always know when you should leave for that meeting. And he created this app that was very complex. It factored in traffic and distance, and it would remind you, hey, it's time to leave for your next meeting. Now, I was the target customer for that. That was not a big problem for me, and I wouldn't pay to solve it because I'll just leave earlier for my next meeting to make sure I make it on time. For my business, I run a leadership training firm, and one of the courses we teach is a communications course. The problem that we look to solve with that course is PowerPoint presentations in organizations are long, they're confusing, they don't get the point across, and ultimately the recommendation doesn't get approved. When I put that problem in front of my target clients, many of them say, yes, we have that issue. Our slides are convoluted, and nobody ever says yes. And fortunately for me, I have a solution to that problem. So as you're articulating your business's problem and how you solve it, make sure it's a clear and compelling statement for your customer. As you're writing your business plan, having a clear understanding of the size of the market is going to help you understand how attractive is the business you're trying to get into. Does the market consist of businesses or is it consumers? How many people are in your addressable market? Articulate, how does the market organize itself? Is it organized by product, by segment, by problem? Is it organized by geography? Spell out some of the common characteristics of the customers in that market. Now, how big is the addressable portion of the profit pool? That profit pool is the dollars that are available in that market and how much of it can the problem that you solve address. Now, some ways that you can size the market are things like looking at market research, gathering analyst reports, even looking at what some of your competitors are doing and how they've reported the size of the market. A good market sizing will tell you what you need to do to scale your business. It will also help you understand, is this an attractive enough market for me to make a return? You're going to be investing as you build this business. You need to know how much market is out there that you're going to be able to capture. Now, obviously, bigger markets are exciting. However, niche markets can be just as lucrative. Look at Apple, for example, with high-end laptops and PCs and phones. It's a very narrow market when you look at the global market for those products. However, it's incredibly lucrative for them because their products are properly positioned within that market. So as you're writing your business plan, articulate what the market looks like and how much of it you think you can capture. Your business plan needs to clearly define your product. Explain the product in simple, non-technical terms. Avoid buzzwords, and also assume your audience is completely unfamiliar with your product. Describe how that product solves a problem and talk about the benefits in a very concrete way. Allow me to offer 2 product descriptions. Now, this is for the same exact product. The first example is, we offer a best-in-class immersive learning experience that provides participants holistic approaches to bi-directional communication strategies that leverage market-driven insights, resulting in learning uptake as demonstrated by elevated Kirkpatrick scores for 12 months post-intervention. You have no idea what I sell. It sounded great as a product description, but it's not clear what the product is or what the benefits are. Allow me to offer a clearer description of this product. We offer a full-day on-site training course that teaches participants a process for communicating more efficiently and effectively, resulting in shorter presentations and faster approval of their ideas. Now, those product descriptions are dramatically different. And in the second one, you understand what the product is and how you, as a customer, can benefit from it. So as you're writing your business plan, make sure your product description is clear and simple and articulates concrete benefits for your customer. Your business plan has to spell out your revenue model for your product or service. This is a huge determinant of how successful your business is going to be. How are you going to make money at this? Is it going to be a one-time charge? Or are there recurring or subscription charges for your product? Are there going to be cross-sell or upsell opportunities? Are you going to sell add-ons that complement the product or service? How are similar products priced in the market? What do your competitors do? What's their revenue model if you're looking for ideas? Also ask, what are your customers willing to pay? Conduct some pricing market research or look at competitive offerings and how they're priced. Then analyze the value of your product and the value it creates and price as a portion of that. Don't leave value on the table. And your choice of a revenue model is going to determine how much of that value you're going to capture. For my business, we sell training courses, and I could price it two different ways. I could price based on how much is it for me to put an instructor on the podium for one day, and then I'll add a markup on top of that as a profit margin for me. Now, unfortunately, that revenue model leaves a lot of value on the table, because if my client sends 10 people to class, or if they send 30 people to class, they're still paying the same amount. But everybody in that classroom is getting the benefit of that instruction. Instead, we have a revenue model where we price based on the participants in the class. Every participant gets value, therefore every participant pays. It's easy to measure, it's easy to charge for, and we're capturing a larger share of the value that's available. So when you articulate your revenue model, make sure you think through what's the value you're delivering and price accordingly. Once you've described the market you're going to compete in and the way your product solves that problem, you need to do a SWOT analysis and describe why you're going to win in that market. It's not good enough to just have a product. You need to understand how you stack up versus your competitors and what your competitive advantage is going to be. You'll conduct a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those are going to highlight implications for how you're going to approach the market and compete there. For example, let's look at a business where you may have a strength in terms of your intellectual property, and a key market segment is showing high demand for that product. A weakness that you have is you lack distribution capabilities, and your competitors have much better distribution than you do. Now, that's going to identify an opportunity for you in terms of how you're going to take your product to market. Because you have that strong intellectual property and no distribution, perhaps your business pursues a strategy where you partner for distribution, and you find a channel partner who has strength in terms of distribution, and perhaps they have a weakness in terms of intellectual property. And that's a good combination for you to take it to market. So when you conduct your SWOT analysis, don't just leave it at doing the analysis. Think through the implications of those strengths and weaknesses and the threats and opportunities you face, and turn those into a plan for how you're going to compete effectively. Your business plan needs to spell out the major customer and market trends that you're going to face, and more importantly, how you're going to react to those trends. What are the major trends? Do they help you or do they hurt you? Is the market growing? Is it flat? Is it shrinking? Is the market fragmented or is it consolidated? And how are people behaving in that market? Are you seeing acquisitions? Are you seeing divestitures? Who makes the buying decisions from a customer standpoint? And are those patterns changing at all? Think through what other products and services do your customers want and need? Are there emerging trends where customers are asking for new things? Some of the sources for this information are things like market research, conducting focus groups, doing some competitive analysis. For my business, as an example, I run a training firm, and during recessions, one of the first things that gets cut from the budget is training, and that trend hurts us. The actions that we can take when we know we're going into a recession are we offset that by selling to more clients, and we ramp up our business development activities. Now, when the trend changes and there's a period of growth, companies invest a lot more in training, and that helps our business. Some of the actions we can take to take advantage of that trend are things like raising prices or driving more volume of courses. Some of the trends from a customer and buyer standpoint that we have to understand are our typical buyers are human resources or learning and development. But as businesses grow, those business unit leaders become more of the buyer because they're making the investment decisions. And we need to shift who we're selling to so we understand the trend and we react. We also think through during those growth periods, what are the additional services and course topics that we can offer because there's demand coming from the market. For your business plan, articulate what the major trends are and the actions you're going to take either to offset the negative trends or take advantage of the positive ones. Your business plan should go into great detail in terms of how your product or service ranks versus your competitors. Now, be honest about your standing versus your competitors. I like to create what I call a moon chart, and that's where you lay out all of your competitors and then articulate how you stack up versus them. One thing you should never say in a business plan is, we have no competitors. That's not believable, and it's risky because it's pointing out that you have a blind spot in terms of the market and where you stand. Now, when you create this moon chart, what you're going to do is list all of the competitors across the top, and then down the side, you're going to list out all the performance dimensions and how you stack up. And within each square on that matrix, you're going to spell out whether you're the best, the worst, or somewhere in between. And again, that's compared to your competitors' offerings. This document is going to help you pitch your idea and how you're going to position yourself with your customers. My example, in my business, again, we sell training services. And the purchase motivators that we look at are the skill gaps that are being filled, the quality of the content, the quality of the instructor who delivers the content, the applicability of that content to a participant's job, and then the cost of the training. Then we look at our competitors and some of the commodity training that's out there. And when we fill out that chart, we're higher in terms of the content, the instructor's skill level, the applicability of our training to the participant's job, but we're much worse on cost. We're not cheap. So we end up positioning our product as a premium product, and we spell out, here are all the extra benefits you get from buying our courses, and yes, you pay more for them compared to these competitive offerings. Another example you may be familiar with, when you look at Apple and the purchase motivators that they're evaluated on. You look at functionality and design, quality and coolness of the product. Maybe you look at apps and ultimately the cost of the product. Apple wins on many of those dimensions, except cost. However, they're able to spell out, here's how we compete, here are the things we're the best on, and here are the things that we're not. And this is how we're going to position ourselves in the market. So when you look at your business, spell out who those competitors are, lay out the evaluation dimensions, and then compare yourself on each dimension versus those competitors. Then at the end of that section of your business plan, spell out the implications of that positioning in terms of how you're going to pitch your product or your service to your customers. Your business plan has to spell out what the threats are to your product. And one of the biggest threats you'll face is substitute products. What can replace your product? What can solve the customer's problem just as easily and do it cheaper? What substitutes are competing for the same dollars that you are? And remember, it may not be a direct competitor to you. Be able to articulate what those substitutes are and why your customer is going to choose your product versus that substitute. A few examples. I had a guy come to me one time with his awesome business idea. And the problem he articulated was when he gets his socks out of the dryer, they're not matched, and it takes him a lot of time to match his socks together. He shared his business idea was for RFID pairing of his socks. So he would put a small device in each sock, and then when he held them close together, they would beep. Now I looked at him and I said, you know the substitute to your product, right? And he said, no, I'm not sure. We don't have any competition. I said, well, I just tie my socks together. And his whole business plan fell apart in that moment. There are always alternatives to your product. I worked at a consumer packaged goods company, and that company sold lawn and garden products. And our CEO one day said, you know who our biggest competitor is? And we were waiting for him to articulate who the other consumer packaged goods company was. And he said, our competition is Google. And everybody looked around the room confused. He said, look, we're both competing for one thing. We're competing for the consumer's time. And that consumer can either spend time in the garden with our products, or they can spend time inside behind their monitor on Google and on the internet. And that's our competition. So how do we position our business to be more competitive with those offerings? Another example is video courses versus classroom training, which is very relevant to me and for you watching this video. People can learn a great deal from video, from the courses that I'm teaching like this. However, I need to be able to differentiate our classroom offerings and show that it's not a complete substitute for what we do. So I have to spell out, this is what you get in the classroom. You get immersion and practice and linkages with your day-to-day job. And here's what you get from video. You get convenience, you get content. And I need to show how each offering benefits the customer. So when you spell out your business plan, lay out what those competitive offerings are and what those substitutes are. And more importantly, what you're going to do to make sure the customer chooses your product versus the substitute. Your business plan has to spell out your go-to-market strategy, both in terms of building awareness for your product or service, as well as how you're going to deliver it. How are you going to reach your customers? What are the channels you're going to use? Again, to market to them as well as to deliver to them. Are you going to go direct? Are you going to go through distribution? How are you going to build awareness for your product or service? Will it be through partnership or licensing? Understand the economics of each of those channels. For example, distributors take a cut of what you sell. However, the benefit you get is they have distribution and they can get you to market more effectively. Now, if you go direct to consumers with your product, you're not paying a distributor's cut, but that doesn't mean it's free. You still have the expense of doing more marketing and getting the product out there yourself. These ideas of how you're going to get to market are ultimately going to flow into your financial plan. A couple of examples. For consumer packaged goods, so cereal in a grocery store, they advertise directly to the consumer through TV and radio and print media. However, when they distribute, it's not direct. They distribute through a distribution channel. They go through the grocery store. Another example is books. Books go through multiple channels, both in terms of getting the word out and delivering the product. In terms of getting the word out, they can do it direct through the website. So for my book, we built a specific website and we're marketing to consumers there. We're also marketing to them through distribution channels like Amazon. It'll be marketed to them through retail in physical outlets like Barnes & Noble, and also through distributors to retail. So there are distributors who will take the book and market it to independent bookstores. Now, in terms of getting it in front of them for awareness purposes, there are the author websites, there are Amazon suggestions, there are publisher sites, there are reviews and periodicals. Sometimes there's live presentations. So there are multiple channels to get that product in front of the consumer, as well as multiple channels to get the product in their hands. So as you're writing your business plan, make sure you articulate both types of channels and understand the economics involved in each one. Your business plan needs to spell out the value proposition of your product or your service. What are the tangible benefits that your customer is going to get from using your product? Are there things like cost or time or quality? And you need to quantify these things to the extent that you can. Perhaps you include testimonials in the business plan or test results. If you can't quantify it because you're selling softer benefits, there's an approach that I call the what do you have to believe approach for quantifying it. An example, for my business, we teach a course on communication skills. Now, this is hard to quantify the benefits because people are coming to class, they're learning how to communicate more effectively. It's not like there are metrics that are readily available for us to measure. So the value proposition as we articulate it to our customers and in our business plan is, if you go to this course, you'll have fewer meetings. You're going to get faster approval of your ideas. You'll do less junk analysis that's not going to see the light of day. And your communications will be clearer and more compelling. Those are all soft benefits. However, those resonate with our customers. Those are all pain points that they have, and we help them understand the concrete benefit of taking this course and how it improves performance on those dimensions. Now, the what do you have to believe approach is a great way to fill in when you don't have data. This course is hard to quantify the benefits for. So I ask, do you believe that if you take this course, you can save 1 hour per month, either in fewer meetings or doing less analysis, maybe getting a recommendation approved the first time around? And every single time I ask that question, do you believe you can save an hour? Everybody says, absolutely. I'm going to save way more than 1 hour. I may save 5, 6, 10 hours. And at that point, I say, well, then we're done because I've articulated value to you. Here's the value of it in terms of dollars. I know what an hour of your time costs. If I take your salary and your benefits over the course of a year and I do some math to get to an hourly rate, I know what that costs. And I also know what the course costs. So here's your hourly rate, here's the cost of the course. If you do that math, when you take the course and you pay for it, you're going to get that investment back in 4 months, which is a really fast turnaround on a payback period. And our customers look at that and say, yes, I unequivocally believe I can save an hour a month. Therefore, I'm going to get these benefits and I'm willing to pay for the course. So you need to articulate your value proposition for your product or service, and to the extent you can, quantify it in terms of the benefits your customer is going to receive. Your business plan needs to clearly spell out the points of differentiation for your product or service compared to your competitors. And those points of differentiation need to be things that your customer cares about. Now, the differences need to be substantial relative to competition. By saying you're 1 to 2% faster than your competitors, that won't get a customer's attention. 20% faster, now you have their attention. Second, they don't just have to be substantive differences, they have to be meaningful. If your customer cares about cost, but not at all about speed, it doesn't matter if you're 20% faster. So make sure as you're articulating these points of differentiation, you look at substantive differences as well as meaningful ones. Now, knowing how you're differentiated is going to help you know where to invest your time and money, because this is a planning exercise. And you're going to focus on those differentiating factors and where to compete or not compete in the marketplace. This is the part of your business plan that's going to keep your strategy focused. And staying on strategy is going to make you more effective and more competitive. It'll prevent you from chasing work you shouldn't pursue. It'll prevent you from investing in things that are going to be dilutive that your customers won't care about. For my business, one of the points of differentiation is all of our instructors who deliver our training are practitioners. We're executives. We're not academicians. We're not career trainers. So our point of differentiation is we put business people on the podium in front of our clients. Now, a point of differentiation is not cost. We're not cheap. We cost more than our competitors. But when we put this in front of our clients and say, yes, we cost more, however, the thing you really care about is the quality of instruction, and this is where we're differentiated, it allows us to compete differently than our competitors who are competing on price. And we walk away from work that is cost-based because we won't do those competitive bids. Instead, we're going to focus on markets that are going to value the experience of our instructors who are on the podium. And it keeps the business focused and on strategy. So as you articulate your business plan, make sure you think through those points of differentiation that your customers care about and that you have a meaningful performance advantage on versus your competitors. And by spelling those out clearly, you're going to make sure that you focus on strategy and you have a more competitive offering. Just because you've built a business, it doesn't mean it's safe. And in your business plan, you should articulate how you're going to protect what you've built. How are you going to protect another company from taking your customers? Maybe you look at things like proprietary rights that you have to the product or service. You may look at things like patents or copyrights. Do you have trade secrets that nobody can replicate? Perhaps you put in place some non-compete agreements or other proprietary knowledge and skills that's going to keep your business safe from competitors taking your customers. Now recognize, a lot of people want to go down the patent or copyright path. However, that's costly and it takes a lot of time. Additionally, just because you have a patent or a copyright, it doesn't mean it can't be defeated. There are companies out there that will infringe upon your patents. There are companies who will sue you in court. And while you may ultimately win the case, it's going to cost you a lot of time and money to defend it. So just be aware of the pros and cons of each of these defensive mechanisms. Also, don't underestimate speed and size as defense mechanisms for protecting your market. One example I know of was a very small company that built an app, and it was growing rapidly, but it wasn't huge. And one day on Twitter, I saw somebody say, I should build a company that does X and create an app for it. And about 2 minutes later, somebody else tweeted in response, well, that's already built, and here's the website. What was fascinating was the first person said, oh, well, it's already built, they beat me. Now, this company wasn't huge, but speed was a defensive mechanism that deterred a potential competitor. Another example in terms of creating those defensive mechanisms is a well-known video-based training company. And you look at the mechanisms they've put in place to protect their business. They have things like recurring subscriptions of members who continue to watch their videos. Another defensive point is they deliver high quality product and proprietary content that you can't get anywhere else. They have size and speed in terms of how they go to market, and they also have exclusive contracts with the authors who create the courses. And all of those mechanisms combined protect their business from competitive threats. In your business plan, lay out what mechanisms you're going to use to protect your business from the threats you're invariably going to face. Your business plan has to lay out your product development roadmap. That roadmap should spell out what the major phases are in product development, as well as the timelines that go along with it. Describe what's in your minimum viable product, the first product that you put in the market. What are the features you're going to release? Then discuss what the next level of prototypes are going to be, as well as when that final product is going to be available and released into the market. The business plan should also describe your approach to testing, research and development, and what that future product roadmap will be. Explain the key risks in your product development lifecycle and how are you going to mitigate or account for those risks. For example, at one point, I ran an online ticketing business. Our initial minimum viable product had 3 features. Customers could sign up for the service, we could list the events we were giving discounts to, and people could hit the buy button and go purchase their tickets. That's it. It was a very bare bones product. Our roadmap then laid out future releases and what features those releases would have. They had things like affiliate tracking and data tracking. We had it where customers could create profiles and we could do some marketing segmentation. Our potential investors wanted to know what our timelines were for each of those features, as well as what the trigger would be, what the gate would be that we would have to pass to invest in building that feature. The reason this was so important was the technology was expensive to build, and we faced some key risks in the market, and some of those risks came to pass. One of our major partners changed their technology platform, and a lot of the features that we were planning in the future all of a sudden were irrelevant. By having a clear product development roadmap, we knew what those risks were and the actions we would take if they came to pass. When you lay out your product development roadmap, lay out those features and functions at each stage of development and articulate what the gates are for you to build that next level of functionality. The next section of your business plan needs to lay out product or service delivery. How are you going to get your product in the hands of your customers? If it's a product, who's going to ship it? Are you going to ship it direct through the post office or UPS or Federal Express? Are you going to sell your product through retail? If it's a service, are you going to go to the customer? Are you going to deliver your service remotely? Are you going to have the customer come to you to be serviced? And then once you've laid out how you're going to get that product and service to them, explain the operational hurdles and challenges you'll face, as well as how you're going to get over them. Let me illustrate some of the different ways that you can discuss getting your product or service to your customers. Scott's Miracle-Gro, which is mostly a consumer packaged goods company, has multiple channels and multiple products and services, which requires them to have a multi-channel delivery approach. For some of their products, their delivery strategy is through retailers. They sell their products at large retailers, and those consumer packaged goods are picked up by consumers in the store. Another one of their businesses is direct to consumer. So the consumer goes to the website, they order, and then it's shipped directly to them. In one case, Scott's owned some retail stores. So they own the channel that they were selling product through, as well as the location where customers were coming to get that product. And one of the businesses they had was a service business, and that service needed to be delivered at the customer's location because it was a service for their lawn. Each of these different channels had its own operational challenges, and they were clearly spelled out, and the business was designed to overcome those challenges. Make sure you lay out the channels you're going to use to deliver your product or service and how you're going to overcome the challenges you're going to face. A brand is a promise, and you should spell out what you want that promise to be. Also lay out, why are your customers going to care? Why is that promise important to them? Then, how are you going to advertise and promote your product or service in a manner that's consistent with and builds that brand? How are you going to communicate with your customers? Will it be online, advertising, public relations? Perhaps it's personal selling or printed materials. Are there other promotional opportunities you're going to take advantage of? Spell these things out in the branding section of the business plan. Then, how are you going to emphasize your points of differentiation? Are you going to point out the problem you solve and why you're better than anyone else at solving it? Let's look at some examples. I want you to think about what you think about when you hear these brand names. Think about the promises they make. What do you feel they're promising to you? How do you see them as different than their competitors? And what channels do you see them marketing in? Let's look at these companies. Apple, Coca-Cola, Walmart, E-Trade, Nike, Southwest Airlines. Every one of those names is a dramatically different brand, and they're articulating different points of their value proposition through different channels. Now, for each of their customers, that brand promise is important, and it drives their loyalty to the organization. So in your business plan, spell out what the promise is that you're making to your customers, why they'll care, and how you're going to get that message out into the market. Pricing is one of the most critical decisions you're going to have to make, and your business plan needs to spell out your pricing model as clearly as possible. You need to understand even a 1% differential on pricing can have a disproportionate impact on your total profitability. Let's assume your business has a 10% profit margin. If you raise prices by just 1% on the top line for revenue, you've increased your profitability by 10%. That 1% will go from your revenue line all the way to the bottom, and your pricing will drive margin from 10% to 11%. Pricing is huge. Do not underinvest in thinking about it. So how do you come up with your pricing? Benchmark some of your competitors. Look at their pricing model as well as their price points, and use those price points as anchors for pricing your own service. Also determine your pricing model and the rationale behind it. Are you going to sell on a cost plus basis? Are you going to sell on a value basis? Is it going to be a one-time fee or ongoing fees or some combination thereof? Laying out this model is critical because you're going to have to message it to the market as well as build the model into your ultimate financial model as part of your business plan. Allow me to illustrate. For my business, we run a training firm. We could have a cost plus model where we say, here's what an instructor costs for one day, and we're going to add this percentage on top in terms of a profit margin. We could also have a value-based pricing model where we say every participant in class pays a fee because they're all getting value from participating in the training. And we look at the value they get, and then we price our service as a portion of that. Our per participant fee is 25 to 40% less than comparable offerings in the marketplace when we look at the different business models that are out there. And having this very clear understanding of our pricing model, where it stacks up in the market, as well as the value that we deliver to the customer, helps us have a very clear way of describing how we're going to market in terms of pricing. You need to have the same level of clarity in your business plan because it will affect how you sell as well as the ultimate financial performance of your organization. In the sales section of your business plan, you have to spell out how are you going to sell your product or service. Will you use a sales force, or will you just go direct to consumer, maybe from your website? If you're using a sales force, what's the sales cycle going to look like? How long will it be? What's the conversion rate from prospect to customer? And make sure in the business plan, if possible, have supporting evidence for that. How are you going to compensate your sales force? Will it be a base salary? Will you pay them a commission? Is it going to be a combination of the two? Because that's going to drive your sales force's behavior. And in the sales section, how are you going to conduct contracting? Will you have long-term contracts? Will you have certain payment terms that you're going to expect? Some examples of different sales models. Let's say you're looking at a large software company. Now that's a complex sale and it's highly technical. For the sales section of the business plan, that would probably spell out that it requires a highly skilled sales force, and those people are going to get paid a base salary plus a commission. It should also spell out that there will be long sales cycles. This is a complex, high-dollar sale with very low conversion rates. Look at another business where, say it's a lawn service business, where it's a moderate or even low complexity sale, low conversion rates, and it requires salespeople to hustle and have high numbers of contacts because the conversion rate is so low. In terms of sales force compensation, I would expect to see a low base salary with a very high commission structure because that's going to drive efficiency because they have to get through a lot of prospects. And you don't want to be paying for unproductive salespeople with a base salary. So depending upon your business, you need to understand how are you going to take it to market, what type of salespeople do you need, and how are you going to compensate them. And having that clarity in your business plan is going to make it clearer how those people will perform as well as how it will show up in the financial performance of your business. Another operational area to cover in your business plan is how are you going to support your product or service. Just because you sell it doesn't mean you're done. What's it going to take to deliver aftercare, to handle returns, to deliver customer service when your customers have questions? How are you going to staff that service? Are you going to insource it and have people within your organization who do it? Are you going to outsource it to another organization? Are you going to make it self-help? What are the expectations that your customers are going to have for this support? How many calls do you expect? How many incidents are you going to handle? What's the return rate on your product going to be? And what expertise is going to be required to handle some of these issues? You need to spell out all of these operational components in your business plan, because if you don't think about them, you're going to have operational challenges down the road. Let's look at an example. When the internet was first booming, America Online used to sell internet access on an hourly basis, and their business was supported a certain way from an operations standpoint for customers who had questions or concerns with that hourly access model. They then decided to go to unlimited access, and people's usage of the internet exploded well beyond what people thought was going to happen. That had huge customer service implications. Now you had more customers using the service, you had some service issues that they had to deal with, and that larger customer base placed an operational strain on the business. The business recovered and dealt with those operational issues, but there were periods of difficulty when it first went with the unlimited model. The lesson here is think about how you're going to support your business before you make any operational changes. And this is exactly what you'll be doing as you write this section of your business plan. Your business plan needs to lay out your people plan, and that people plan needs to be built from the bottom up. You need to look at the demand factors that are going to drive how many people you need. What job families do you need, and where will you hire them from? Do you need operational folks? Do you need finance, HR, IT? Will they be employees or will they be contractors? How are you going to use vendors to augment your internal personnel strategy? You have to think through what are the ramp-up times and the training requirements for somebody. Just because you say you need someone doesn't mean they're going to be effective in the role on the day you hire them. You need to work backward and say, it's going to take us 3 to 6 months to find this person, and after we have them, it's going to take 2 months to train them. This all needs to be part of your people plan. How are you going to staff as you grow your business, and what's going to drive that staffing growth? So if you take on new customers, how many new customers do you have to have before you hire an incremental person? And when do you achieve those scale benefits? When is that hiring going to flatten out while the business continues to grow? You'll also need to lay out how much do these people cost? What's the turnover going to be? How much are the benefits you're going to pay them? All these numbers are going to feed into your financial plan. And by building your people plan based on the demand factors as your business grows, and laying out that plan on a quarterly basis, you're going to be able to more accurately predict what your financials will look like. In the beginning of your business plan, you'll even want to lay out your staffing forecast on a monthly basis. For example, I started a technology startup at one point. The initial staff was just the management team. All IT, legal, finance was outsourced, and we had no support functions, no sales staff, and we didn't need any service given where the business was. Now, our business plan called for, as the business grew, we would need to add certain personnel. As it scaled, we said at this point, we're going to start adding sales staff. And then at this point, we'll add marketing staff. And when the business gets to this point, we'll add technology staff. So the business growth drove the staff growth, and we had a clear picture of what those personnel needs would be. So as you lay out your business plan, think through all the different job families and what's going to drive their growth, how much they're going to cost you, and what the pace of hiring will be. A major component of your operating portion of your business plan is how you're going to manage production. Where are you going to make your product? Are you going to insource or outsource? What suppliers are you going to use? Will you own or lease the equipment? You'll also need to discuss how are you going to meet demand, manage facility utilization, and deal with peak or slack periods of demand. Once you've built your operating plan, ask, do your operations match your product strategy? For example, if you're a low-cost product provider, will your operations grow and give you scale so you can keep your costs low? If you're a high-quality supplier, are your suppliers up to the task of meeting your high-quality product? Some key things to consider as you build this operating plan is, what do you do in terms of production flexibility? If there's a demand swing, if you get a huge order in, how are you going to meet that need? If all of a sudden orders dry up, how are you going to manage your facilities if they're not full? What are the people demands for managing production? You don't just need the frontline personnel. You can't forget things like supervisors, safety, shipping, supply chain. As your organization grows and as your operations grow, there are some regulatory requirements in terms of the number of people you have to have and the job families they need to fill. This section of the business plan should spell those needs out. And the last thing to consider is, how are you going to make your operations less capital intensive? When you tie up a lot of money in property, plant, and equipment, that's less money you can spend elsewhere. Trying to reduce the capital intensity of your business is going to improve your overall profitability. And it's something you should think through in this section of your business plan. Suppliers are an important part of your business, and you need to explain how you're going to manage those suppliers. In my view, you should do what you're great at and focus on your core competencies and then partner or outsource everything else. This is a critical strategic concept, and if you'd like more detail on it, check out my strategic planning course, where I cover how to think about your core competencies and how to leverage them in the marketplace. For your business, as you write your business plan, think through what your major inputs are to making your product, and then who are the suppliers? Do you have backups for those suppliers? Do you have a diversity of sources to mitigate supplier risk? How are you going to manage the costs of the things you buy from your suppliers? Do you intend to have long-term contracts? Will you conduct a scheduled bid? Will you have any partners, joint ventures, alliances for key components? Something like Intel Inside, where Intel chips are in major computers from a variety of manufacturers. Supplier risk is a huge risk for your business. If a major supplier goes down or decides to renegotiate rates, what's your backup plan? What financial risks do you face from supplier concentration? And how are you going to mitigate those risks? What operational risks do you face by insourcing things that you're not great at, things that aren't your core competency? What reputation risks do you face in your supplier strategy? If you partner with someone or you buy a lot of product from a supplier and they do something wrong, what's the risk to your business? Think through some of the large companies who have partnered with famous athletes or movie stars, and that athlete or star does something that isn't so great, and look at the risk that that company who sponsored them faces. These are all risks that you should be articulating in the supplier section of your business plan. So understand where you're going to get your product, what the concentration risks are, and how you're going to mitigate it to have a clear and compelling piece of this operating plan. As you build your business, especially if you're seeking outside investment, the leadership team is going to be something people will evaluate very closely. Some investors say they'd rather invest in a great management team with an okay idea than in an okay management team with a great idea. The leadership team matters a lot, and this is your opportunity to show people how great that team is. In this section of the business plan, define who the executive team is and draw the organization chart. Who reports to who? Put in the blank boxes with job descriptions for people you'll hire in the future. You should include brief bios of each leader and include their relevant experience that shows how they're going to contribute to the team. Link their past experiences and accomplishments to the role they'll be playing in this organization. You should also describe the ownership structure of the company, including decision-making authority. For example, does the founder of the company have final say, or does the CEO? Include current ownership and a view of future ownership. Last, what are the roles that need to be filled, and what are the timelines or triggers for filling them? Where are you going to seek this talent, and how are you going to acquire it? This section on the management team can't be underestimated in terms of its importance. And having those great, compelling bios that give an investor or even people who are looking to join the company an understanding of, here's the team's capabilities, and here's how those capabilities tie directly to what this business does, is going to inspire confidence in the investors as well as future team members. You may be smart, but it's even smarter to surround yourself with other smart people. This is the role of advisors for your business, and you should spell out who those advisors are within your business plan. There are several types of advisors you can pursue. There's an advisory board. An advisory board typically gets brought together during the earlier stages of your business. They can help you get customers, investors, they can help you build out your team, and they may play an ongoing role as your organization grows. There's a board of directors. These people are formally elected and have legal responsibilities. They're typically not needed until you receive outside investment and you have shareholders. The board serves as experts on special topics. They'll be responsible for compensating management and holding management accountable to shareholders. Other advisors you can have are specialists. They're brought in to advise on a specific topic. They're not usually involved on an ongoing basis, and they can be paid as consultants, or you can pay them with equity. And your board should change as the business grows and as the needs of the business evolve. For example, there's a startup that I worked with initially, and my friend asked me to become a member of the advisory board. The business was just getting started, and I had specific expertise on one area where he needed guidance. We got some stock options in the business, and the board of directors was formed later when there was full investment in the company. At that point, when a formal board of advisors was built, the advisory board, the informal one, was disbanded, and we transitioned the advisor role. So think through your advisory needs for your business, identify who those people are, and what the structure of those advisory boards will be. Your business plan needs to include a perspective on how you're going to compensate management. There are various ways that you can compensate your leadership team. You can give them cash, bonus, or equity. And there are a variety of forms of equity that you can issue, things like stock or options. I highly suggest you get some legal assistance from somebody who has done this type of agreement before. When you are awarding equity, that equity needs to vest over time, even for the founders. This way, if a founder quits, they don't walk away with a big chunk of equity just for having a good idea. Cash is also tight when you first start your business, so equity tends to be the preferred way to compensate management. But you have to realize that equity is the most expensive form of financing, and give it out wisely. This is why it's so important to spell this out in your business plan. Deferred cash or a bonus is another option for compensating management, if your executives don't need cash right now. And doing so is cheaper than equity, but it preserves the cash you need to start up the business. No matter what, put employment agreements in place that specifically spell out compensation, because when your business plan is complete and you think about taking it in front of investors, the way you're compensating management is going to have an impact on the return those investors might get. An example I'm very familiar with. I started a business with a founder and some other partners, and we made the mistake of not having the founder's equity vest over time. A short while into the venture, the management team disagreed, and the founder decided to depart. We had to buy him out of all of his equity because he just walked away with the idea. We also paid the employees a combination of cash and non-voting shares, so that there was a different class of stock for people that we could award them with. These can be very complex transactions, and you do need legal and financial assistance as you set this up, but it's a section of your business plan that has to be completed, especially if you're going to seek outside investment. When you run a business, there are a lot of administrative matters you're going to have to handle. These are non-negotiable. Many of them are regulatory requirements. Which firms are you going to use for your finance, HR, legal, intellectual property? Who's going to represent you? And who on your team is going to manage administrative matters for your company? There are some key questions you need to be able to answer as you build your business plan. Are all your licenses and business filings complete and accurate? Are you sufficiently insured? Are you compliant with all laws like tax law, employment law, safety law if you're doing some manufacturing? Is your business legally protected? Do you have the right legal structure, intellectual property and copyright protections? Are your contracts solid? And are your finances correct? Are you issuing 1099s and W-2s and filing your taxes appropriately? These aren't fun things to deal with. However, they're critical, especially if you get them wrong. So spend some time, find some external service providers who can help you with this, and make sure you have these things buttoned up before you launch your business. A major component of your business plan is your financial plan. And the first step in building that financial plan is documenting your assumptions. What are you going to assume, and what's the grounding for those assumptions? Maybe you look at comparables, market research, or basic estimates to figure out what that ingoing assumption is. You'll also need to lay out what the best case and worst case scenario is for each assumption, because they'll drive different financial performance. Then explain how large of an impact each assumption has on your overall financial performance. For example, my firm runs training classes. In the beginning, when I wrote the business plan, we had assumptions around the price of our courses, and we looked at comparable training to say, here's our assumption, and here's what the market bears. We looked at conversion rates in terms of sales. We had an assumption around how many participants we would have in each class, because we charge on a per participant basis. I had to make assumptions about the number of courses we would offer and how many instructors I would have on the team. And then each of those assumptions had a low, medium, and high estimate that drove similar scenarios in the eventual financial forecast that we built. We also, in the business plan, clearly explained that the biggest assumptions we had were around pricing and conversion rates on sales, because they drove the business case financials more than any other assumption. By having your assumptions clearly articulated, you can track your financial performance and revisit those assumptions over time to make sure your forecasts are as accurate as possible. Your financial forecast is the heart of your business plan. Without a good forecast, you don't know if you even have a viable business or what financial results you can expect. When you build your financial forecasts, build them from the bottom up and build them by month based on unit drivers. So, how many courses are you going to sell? How many widgets are you going to produce? Understand how those drive the financial performance. You'll need to build a full profit and loss statement with all line items accounted for, and use the assumptions you've already created to drive that financial forecast. You'll forecast your revenues, your costs, how much cash you'll have, what your balance sheet and income statement look like. And if you don't know how to do this, seek professional help from a financial firm. When you build your forecasts, you're going to want to have several cases. Build a worst case, where you have accelerated and increased costs and delayed or lower than expected revenue. Build an expected case, which should be conservative. And build a best case, which is your costs are as expected and you have accelerated revenue. By looking at that complete picture, you'll understand what happens if things don't go well and what happens if things go great. When I built my business, we forecast what our courses would cost, how many participants we would have in each class by month, how many customers we would be signing up, the number of classes we would sell, the number of instructors we would have, and when they would join the firm. We forecast what our materials would cost, as well as all of our selling, general, and administrative costs, like legal assistance, financial assistance. And I had a worst case, a base case, and a best case scenario. What was great about that was, as I learned more and looked at my assumptions I initially made, I was able to tweak them based on new information and see how my financial forecast would change. Invest the time in building forecasts that are as accurate as you possibly can, because they're going to tell you what your business will look like in the future and help you plan accordingly. It takes money to run a business, and there are 3 critical numbers you'll have to know. How much capital do you have on hand? What's your burn rate? And how much runway do you have? Capital on hand is how much cash do you have in the bank. Your burn rate is how much money are you spending every month to pay your staff, to run your business. And then runway is, if you look at how much cash you have on hand and assume no more money comes in, how long do you have before you run out of money? Obviously, the longer the runway is, the safer your business is. You'll also need to create a perspective on when you'll hit cash flow break even, which is, when is the business generating enough money, enough profit to pay the costs of running that business every month. And your investors are going to want to know, at what point are you going to hit cash flow break even? Because that's when you don't need any more money invested. Your business plan should also spell out where you plan on getting your capital from. Will it be from the owners, loans, friends and family? Will you seek outside investors or grants? Will you work with partners who will give you money? Also, what are you going to use the capital for? By the way, the only good uses of capital in the early years of running your business are things that drive sales: marketing, sales force, or product development. If you're spending money on anything other than those items, your investors are going to question it. At one point, I ran a business with some friends, and we had some initial capital that was invested from the founders. We took money out of our own pockets, some friends, and some family members. We saw outside capital from some angel investors, and we actually didn't get it initially because they wanted to see how the business would perform for a little while before they put their money in. They thought it was too risky at that point. Our initial capital went to building the technology platform, and our business was restricted because we couldn't invest much in the sales efforts. We ended up never having enough cash on hand to drive sales, and we couldn't reach cash flow break even. The business wasn't viable. So as you're thinking about your business, be very clear about how much money you're going to need to hit the point where the business is self-sustaining. Every business faces financial risks, and you should lay out in your business plan what those risks are and what you're going to do if they come to pass. Some of the risks you might face. What happens if you lose funding? What happens if you don't get that loan or the investment you were counting on? What if you lose a big customer or the economy turns south? What if that marketing campaign you thought was going to be huge turns out to not work? What happens if you get sued for intellectual property or a major competitor emerges? All of these are bad things that could happen to your business. But if you think about them now and plan for them, you can put contingency plans in place. You could do things like cut expenses or lay off staff. You might seek additional loans or additional investment, or the founders might put more money in. You could drop prices, market more, offer retention discounts for some of your customers. You may even say, we would sell out to a competitor or partner with another firm. Having these contingency plans in place enables you to react more quickly. I invested in a startup at one point, and the sales didn't happen as quickly as they thought they would. They ran into a cash crunch and they needed more money, but they had a plan in place. They issued some new equity to bring in more cash. They sold part of their business off, and they cut expenses across the board to maintain the business as a viable entity. They had a good plan. It wasn't fun to put it in place, but they didn't panic when the bad things happened. So think through what the risks your organization faces are and put them in your business plan along with the contingency plans to go along with it. As you build your business, make sure you're clear on whether it's a lifestyle business or if you're looking to exit, because it has huge implications for how you're going to fund it. If your business is built to exit, your investors will want to know, how are you going to exit? Will it be by acquisition? And who might buy your company? Will it be a sale just to other owners? Now, if you say we're going to do an IPO, it sounds a little bit silly, especially in the early stages of running a business. So be practical about saying what your exit might be. If it's a lifestyle business, just understand that you'll get fewer people who are willing to invest in that. When you lay out your exit plan, expect an ROI. Your investors will. What's the return on the investment that they're going to get? What's the timing they should expect it on? Your investors will want their money back and then some. I had a startup approach me at one point, and they were seeking investment, but it wasn't clear what the exit would be. They couldn't tell me what my return on investment might be. The investment was for all the right reasons. They were going to invest in sales and marketing and product development. They were looking to grow this business dramatically. But the answer I got was, well, we may exit or we may stay a lifestyle business. We're not really sure. It'll be up to the board of directors and we'll make that decision when we get there. Ultimately, I didn't invest in that because it wasn't clear if or how I would get my money back or get a return on that investment. So your business case needs to spell out Is it going to be a lifestyle business for you, where you're not seeking external investment and you're just looking to build something to give you personal income? Or is it something where your investors can expect a return? Once you've finished writing your business plan, go back and check it for quality, because I've seen a lot of pitfalls that people fall into once they've written that plan. Some of the major ones include, oh, we don't have any competitors. Everybody has competitors. Your customers are looking to spend their money somewhere. It may not be with you. Another risk is when you write, it's a $10 billion market, and if we just get a little bit of that, we'll be millionaires. That's a huge risk, because you may not understand what really drives the financial performance of your business. To mitigate it, do bottoms-up financials with unit drivers. Speaking of financials, another risk to look for is that hockey stick with your financials. You don't make a lot of money in the early years, and then it takes off and grows exponentially. That's not really believable. It's a warning sign. Very few businesses hit that exponential growth. You may have ungrounded assumptions. Have some evidence, or at least a sensitivity analysis with a plan to validate those numbers. Your business may be poorly funded, or the founders don't have skin in the game. They haven't personally invested. You can never have enough money to run your business. Plan for the worst case, and make sure you have a plan for the founders to put some of their own money in it. Last, in terms of risks that may be embedded in your plan, are investing in non-product or non-sales related items in the early years. Investments in buildings, administration, corporate staff, those are low return investments. All your focus should be on your product or your service and helping sell it from the beginning. Once you've reviewed your plan for these pitfalls, you'll have a much more robust plan, and it's going to be more believable, more credible to investors when you seek money. Once you've gone through all the steps of business planning, your next steps are reasonably clear. Define your product and how you're going to compete. Clearly spell out what the market is. What's the service, and why are your customers interested in it? Explain your go-to-market strategy. How are you going to sell? How are you going to build your brand? Build the operating plan and refine your assumptions that go into it. Understand the people requirements and the operating requirements to get your product into the market, and then support it after it's out there. Determine how you're going to manage your people and your administration. How are you going to pay people? How are you going to reward them? Build that solid financial plan. I can't overemphasize how critical that financial forecast is for having a viable business. Your financial plan is going to drive your financial results. And last, document that business plan, package it, make it clear and simple, and then share it with advisors to get their feedback. Pursue building the business and getting the required investments. And if you've invested the time in putting together a solid plan, your likelihood of launching a solid business goes up dramatically.